solve it.
We also store the variable inside the same environment.
Okay. So, we want to connect the database to our app, right? Well,
Almost.
that's. Okay. And now it's acting up. Yeah, we wanted to connect the what's called our app to the database, right? But if we wanted to upload this to Heroku as well, our credentials for logging into the database would be exposed, right? Our password, the host, and everything, which is not ideal. So,
What do you exactly mean when you say exposed?
I mean, when you upload your files to GitHub, everyone can just see it, right? They can open the file.
If it's an open source project,
yeah, exactly.
everyone can see it.
Yeah, right. And that would be very much not cool if you can just, everybody could log into a database and do whatever with it, like drop everything, or even possibly if it was a big company, get all passwords and users and all that, if it's not encrypted, which it should be. So a solution to hide, in quotation, it is to use the env, right?
Actually, this is a solution. It's a solution to a security problem, but it's also a solution to a job interview problem. Because the easiest way to fail a job interview is if you put your database credentials in your GitHub.
But why do you say in the quotation mark?
Which part?
All of it.
Like
Yeah,
job interview question?
No, you said
Okay, yeah.
okay. Okay, that's okay. Because you said like node environment.
But anyhow, the problem that we're solving here is that we don't want people to gain access to our database just by going into our GitHub profile and finding the credentials to the database.
Now I can show you because there's not anything on it. So in Heroku, we got you can make a database and you get some credentials, right? You could take these and plug them into, let's say, MySQL. When you connect, you can give it, here you can actually give it an object where it says a host name. We made a separate file like host name, and then give it the string, the host name and everything. We chose to do something else. We used a .env file that we then git ignore, so we don't upload to GitHub. This file, then we give it it's a variable that we then give the information which only lives locally, right? So in Node, it requires a library to make it run, .env, it's called, where we then we initiate it, and that's it. So when I run this locally, right here, right, it then, let's see here, yeah, now there's nothing there.
Maybe we should make sure that people understand the term environment variable.
Right.
Anyone who doesn't understand, doesn't know what an environment variable is?
I'll say it real quick.
I'm sure some of you don't know.
Okay, an environment variable is a variable that only really exists in a specific environment. Not exists, but the value is only assigned in the environment. For example, something that if you've deployed to Heroku, you've tried the process.env.port. Heroku uses that environmental variable to then assign you a port. This could change on your local machine we could delete this and make something in this file that says port and then assign 9001 here, right? Then we can just do this, actually, right? This on my machine, when I start my Node server, this is an environment. The plugin then takes the .env file that I've created and uses that variable. When you upload it to Heroku, that's a different environment, right? So it has different variables. It's still the same variable. Still the same variable that we've declared. It just has a different value in another environment.
Maybe show them that you can set environment variables in Heroku as well.
It's the same. That's just it. This is the
on the panel.
The settings.
In the Heroku panel.
Oh, no, Heroku.
Can
to set it here?
Yeah, we will.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So this is here where you set the config, the environment variables inside Heroku.
Right.
So if you type something there, it will be read by your application. So if you have like port, it will be read by the config.env.port.
I don't think they allow you to set port though, but you could.
Yeah, probably not a good idea to try to run it on 9001 because I guess it should be running on 443. But
Yeah.
so what is it exactly that this npm package does?
I'm pretty sure that it allows you. It sets these variables in Node, like when the node starts running, when the node application starts running. Process.env is like an object that it makes like right at the beginning, because I'm pretty sure Node doesn't support at all from the start. I'm not quite sure on the nitty-gritty though.
Yeah, so the point is just that if you create the .env file on your local computer, then the .env npm package will take the contents of that file and put it into your environment variables. And the cool thing about the .env file is that it's a separate file, and since it's a separate file, you can add it to your gitignore file. So that means you can avoid getting the .env file inside GitHub.
Right.
That also means whenever you clone a repository that relies on this, you clone the repository and then you go and have to read the README where it says this project is using .env to set up environment variables. You have to create a .env file and you have to set the following variables, something like that. Something you should probably add to README if you haven't done that already. So usually the process would be you clone the repository, then you create a .env file, then you set the values that you want. So you want it to run on port 9001. You want this and this and that. You want this URL to the database because it's your local database. It's not a Heroku live database, not when you're working locally, and so on. And once you create that .env file, the .env library takes care of the rest.
Right. You could actually, what's called, as an example, Heroku, when you create a database, it creates an environment variable for you, right? So this is a string with the username, password, the host in the database in one string. You could, if you wanted to, we just did it in a different way. Here, the process.env, the cleared database, this is the string when it runs on Heroku, right, in that environment. But when I run it on my node machine, it's nothing because I haven't assigned it, so it returns false. So then we add an OR statement, right? So this then becomes, when it's locally, what runs. And that we have assigned in the environment variable. You could, if you wanted to, remove this completely and add hostname, username, password, and database name to the Heroku, what's it called?
CLI.
You could also do that through the CLI, but I'm not really good at the Heroku CLI. Let's say hostname, and this would be process.env that hostname on Heroku would also run the exact same as here. It's just a bit easier to use Heroku's already made one.
You see also
Yeah, it is. Oh yeah, the gitignore here is, where is it? By default, when you use create React app, it gitignores the .env by default.
But I think the takeaway you should remember from here is whenever you're sitting in your code and you find yourself typing the password to your database in your file somewhere, you should think, is this password going to end up on GitHub? If it is, then you have to think about what can I do to avoid that. And .env is one way to do that. And if you have questions, you can ask, or you can try to Google, or like. But it is actually really serious if you have stuff like that in your GitHub profile, because that's one of the first thing that someone who's like reviewing your code for like a job interview or something like that. That's one of the first things they would look for. And I mean, of course, they know that you've been doing a 6-month coding program, so they probably know that you can't do absolutely everything. But it's just like, it's pretty easy to get rid of, and it's super critical if it is there. So
it also introduces some convenience, right? Because you could do in your local, what's called your local environment, you could set, let's see, a local database that you've set up for testing reasons, right?
Yeah.
And then like here, you could have a production, environment here, right? And then if that's not true when you're running locally, you could use your test database on your local machine.
So you actually introduce a valid point there. When all students have become rock stars, and if there's 100 people that wants to use your code, they can have their own environment settings.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how code scales well when you have environment settings, and not in the code base.
Something we also use it for at work, environment variables, is feature flags. Feature flags is something where maybe you build an application and it has some hidden features that you want to be able to turn on and off because maybe you need to test something in production. Usually you don't want to test things in production, but maybe you want to see if more users convert, if more users sign up, if you introduce this little thing. So maybe you can set a little variable in there that you can turn on and off. And when you turn it off, there's like another login flow display. And when you turn it off, it's back to the old one. And you can control that, so you can just go into Heroku and you can set an environment variable like that. That's like, you can use it for all sort of things. But generally, you want to have your secret things like database passwords,
API
tokens, API tokens. You want to have that in environment variables. You want to probably have the path to your database in an environment variable, so it's easy to switch between different databases. Quite often you have just like an environment variable that tells you whether this is dev or production. And you could also have some logic in your code where you then have the URL to the database, but then imagine that someone figures out that we cannot host the database on that domain, we have to host the database on another domain, and you have to go in and change it in code. And you have to make sure that you commit that code and deploy it at exactly the same time as the other guy is changing the DNS settings or something like that. That's a nightmare. The cool thing about environment variables is that they can be changed on Heroku as the application is running. Yeah. Cool, great. Yeah. And then I asked Jacob to tell you a little bit about Next.js.
Yes.
So, just to understand what is the problem that we want to deal with. So, this is kind of hopefully not the first time you're working with other people. But officially in Hack Your Future, it's kind of the first time you have to work in groups. And working in groups and working with code introduces a lot of different things. You already know that we're using Git, and that's in order to make sure that we can make code work smoother. But there's one thing that keeps popping up when you're working in groups and you're working on an application like this, and that is that someone changed something in a database. Someone changed the database schema. So imagine that you have a database where you have a table called products, and then someone else renames that table to product. Maybe he wanted it to be singular instead of plural.
Let me know if you want me to explain what connectors.
Yes, I will. So imagine someone makes a change, and that someone is some guy sitting over here, and I pull the latest changes, the latest code changes, and he changed everything in the application so it references product instead of products in plural, and suddenly my code breaks. And this is where connects come into the picture.
So when you're working in teams, you want to store the changes you did in the version control. So when you're adding a feature, for instance, let's say an inter list, like you did last week, so that required a mentor table, maybe. So you needed to add that. So one way to go about that is to actually give the other team members the SQL file and say, run that. But you also have the possibility to run something called Knex. So that's a utility that you can run via Node that helps you communicate with your database. So it's a SQL query builder. So you can use that both for generating SQL, and you can also use it for creating tables, updating tables, and inserting seed data to it. So there's a lot of use for it. It's a good abstraction for communicating with the database. So what you have here on the screen right now is something called a migration that creates a new table called useless with some attributes on it. So if you read the code, you could probably read what the SQL will be. So it creates a table called users whose email password created and updated that. So the trick is that this code will work on all databases: MySQL, Postgres, MariaDB, Microsoft SQL.
Relational databases, right?
Yes, all of them.
Not NoSQL databases. And use it in a Mongo.
I think somebody hacked in support for that as well.
MongoDB?
Yeah, but it's not intended.
Yeah.
Think of this as an easy way to communicate with MySQL. So you can run this as code. So you can say, when I gave you this commit with this feature, then I added this table. So you can run that code to create that table. So that's basically what it's all about. So in Knex, the model is also that you will keep track of the migrations that have been run. So if you have like 10 migrations, then you will have a table that keeps track of what migrations have been run. So you can say, well, yesterday I ran this migration, so I'm now going to run it today. So that's a way to keeping track of what the database is like.
Okay, so I'm sitting in a situation right now that I just did a git pull.
Yes.
And my code started breaking because my teammate has changed something. Now imagine that we are using Knex. How would Knex step in and help me here?
So then you would be able to run Knex migrate latest. This command will take whatever migrations have been checked into version control and update the database for you. So this is an extremely useful tool when you are working on teams. So that's the way in for why Knex is useful. But the trick is that you also can use Knex for an overall architecture for communicating with your database. There's a good description of the tool on its homepage, knex.js.org. So here you can see the abstractions for all the SQL features that there are. Using this tool for actually communicating with your database, it helps you with abstracting things. So I take it you try to construct a SQL string in raw mode, and that's probably not a good idea because of the things with SQL injection and well, the likes, and maybe when you construct a string, you forget to wrap it properly. So this tool helps you with that. But I realize that it might be a lot to take in right now, to take in another tool. But when you get to the point where you struggle with updating the database, then let's talk about it. If Knex can help you about with that. We have flow right now when you're sharing updates to the database. How far are you along? And last week you probably had to create a database table.
I added another field called active and visited.
Okay, so you added another field, and your teammate had to.
He should update his database also,
Yeah.
and we should update the remote one.
Yes.
All of them.
So imagine what happens imagine you're communicating on Slack. You're sitting at home, each of you, right?
Yeah.
And you created a new table, and you do a git pull, and suddenly it doesn't work. So you ask, what's wrong? Why doesn't it work? You tell back, oh, you just have to create this table, and it has to look like this. Imagine this conversation on Slack. Imagine if this conversation on Slack could just be inside GitHub, and your application could figure out to create that table itself, rather than you having to go back and debug and figure out, okay, so this is the table that's missing. So that's actually what Knex will do for you. It will just say, like, you kind of have like button where you can say, fix my database, and then it will fix your database for you. Because all the changes to the database are suddenly in GitHub.
I have a question. So you install this and then you run before or after the git pull?
After the git pull, because in the git pull you get the Knex migration file. So what we saw before is a separate file, and Knex will go in and it will see on your local computer what was the last migration that has run. That was like the migration before the one we just saw. So that means we have one pending migration that still needs to run, because this is new stuff. It just came from GitHub. So this is the new stuff. So we go in and we make sure to run the stuff that hasn't been run on your local computer.
And then you could like compare the changes between
Yes. There will be some tables inside the database keeping track of what the migrations have been run.
It won't actually compare whether you created new tables or anything like that. There are some other tools where you can just go in the database and you can make a new table, and you can say, create a migration for me. You did Rails, right? Or just Ruby? Or? Yeah, because in Rails, migrations is a really big thing. And it can do something like that. Here you have to write the migration file yourself. But that also means that you hopefully you're a little more control with what's happening, and you don't have to like learn as much as you need to if you're using the tools that you have in Rails. Maybe just mention the down migration.
Yeah. So if you're writing an up migration, so for adding features, then you probably should also write a down migration for removing your feature if something goes wrong. But mostly that's in extreme situations. For like,
I don't think so, because quite often I find that if you check out a earlier commit, maybe. So maybe you were ahead. You're working on a branch and you created a table in your own database, and you made a migration for that, and then you need to help your teammate, and your teammate is working on something that's a little bit older.
yes,
Then it needs to run that down migration to remove the table from your database.
maybe. Yeah.
Sometimes you can get away with not doing it, but but just think of the down migration as kind of like the undo function. If you have like Word or Photoshop or something like that, you have an undo button, and that's kind of what the down migration does.
Yes.
But you have to write a down migration. You have to write the reverse action. So if you're creating a new table, you need, in the down migration, you need to delete that table, and you had that in your example as well, I saw.
Yes. So, but I expect this tool to be useful for you, and I see this tool used in the industry a lot. So I expect you to be acquainted with this when you reach a job somewhere. I don't know where that should be, but one in a third of the companies I've been through or talked to, they have something similar to this. So, and it's a good thing. So yeah, I think we should maybe talk about this again when you are struggling with updating the database. I expect this to happen like in 2 or 3 weeks.
But it would be really nice if you can just do a little bit of reading on Knex alongside your research work, because right now you're working individually, so you won't have so much struggle with this. But it would be nice if you're ready for the group work challenges, because that's where you really run into these things where you start like, oh, now you change the database, now I have to, and stuff like that. That's super frustrating. And I was talking with the last final class. They didn't do connects because neither Jacob or I were here, and we've been pushing a lot for that. So they didn't do connects, and then they were telling me, oh yeah, so we actually had all these problems. And I also tried to incorporate teaching something like this in the MySQL class. We just haven't managed to get it into the curriculum yet, but I definitely think it should be part of the standard curriculum. So that's why I want to make sure that we introduce it for you, because it can be a big time saver, and it can make it a lot less frustrating to work together. Because I think like the worst case scenario is that there's only one person in the group who has the computer where everything works. And that means there's only one person writing code. The other people is like sitting around that person and trying to like, oh, try this, or something like that. Or even worse, the other people in the group, they just stop working and they go home. That's like the absolute worst case scenario, right? So think of this as a collaboration tool, in the same way as GitHub is a collaboration tool. And these two things, they go together.
Or think about it as less work for you when you're going to explain stuff.
If you're that person who has a computer that everything works on, you need to, as fast as possible, make sure that there are other people who have a computer everything works on. Because it's only going to get worse from there. You're going to get all the freaking work. And it might sound sensible because then you know what's going into the code base, but it's not. So nobody can help you once you get stuck.
Think of this tool as, I'm going to avoid trouble by using this. When they say, I now spent 10 hours on implementing this feature, and then I say, oh no, I'm going to spend like 1/2 hour or an hour explaining how to set that up. If that's just git pull, connect migrate latest, and it just works, then you're home free, right? I hope that makes sense.
Do you have an old tutorial repo or something like that from one of the classes that we could share with them?
But,
or maybe we can make something quick.
Yeah.
Cool. So we have half an hour left. I think we should try to get started with your individual tasks. And then the goal is to, like those, always when you get a task, it's like, oh, this sounds cool, it's not so difficult, I can figure this out. And then you get started and then you're like, oh fuck, there's this, and there's this, and there's this, and there's this. So let's try to get you started and then have as many as these questions happen while Jacob and Daniel and I am still in the room. Because it just takes a little bit longer if you have to deal with it on Slack.
Have you uploaded it on Git?
The questions? No, not yet. I
think it's better to see the description that you have.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of want to edit it a little bit. No, that's what Git is for. I copy it on Git and then I might edit it a little bit later and I post on Slack. Were you saying so?
Yeah, I was just gonna suggest to put my summary while we do the. Okay, but you can do it.
It's this one class, right? Class06 final project?
Yes. Maybe before that.
Yeah, just put it in a button and then maybe we'll restructure it after.
Okay.
I have a problem with my email, it's not working now.
Okay. Do you have an alternative?
Yeah. Find some to
It's shop system. Books everything to do with the shop system.
send them around to you.
Then I'm sure that you will have. We could could easily do this remotely, but it's done.
But I have it as a workplace setup. No, but I have it override. One of the it should be because this is the workspace. I have the workspace.
Should I just publish this on the channel or what? The topics.
Yeah, do that. Second.
Maybe it's Visual Studio's own section.
Windows features.
So it should be override. We have a workspace.
It's not.
This is user setting. Workspace setting is project specific. Yeah. So I have to install the ESC. This is setting. It's not in it.
Hey guys, I took a look at that thing about the proxy without the dict. So here, this is React app. So in the So when I allow calls, I can do this. While developing, I'm working. I need some kind of setting for the for the elements to work. But I haven't found a way for that yet. But I think I'll find that. So you can say when it's local, it's but
Jeg kan køre
then we can do that. See,
Det er meget mærkeligt, fordi det er Windows,
and then
der
just
faktisk, så
with an API like that.
de har også business intelligence.
So that's I think that's like 1/10 of complexity. So I just need to find out a way for the API call.
I know I
calculated here.
I made this an alias for the Windows version.
So
But I also still
I just need a way
Sorry,
of
for the
like
second.
0.5.
Simply as an extension.
Yeah. So here I'm not
With den her extension, der bevæger med fra WSL. Det kommer en liste
all
over.
the API. With that, with calls and or in pairing.
Det gør den også.
The thing is,
Der lister der point. Det er den, der kommer support. Det er fordi der okay.
it's just the node server, right?
Right.
So
It is.
if this just runs in production,
Du kan se, der er ikke noget
and
Windows
if I
server.
do this,
CDMNT,
Especially when
It
you
is.
don't have even like
Build.
we don't have
CDC,
then that will
There's
place
no triple Linux. Så ser den Windows som make
controllers?
some for like Windows Linux.
Something on the notes.
Ah.
So
I
that
just
will run.
save and then it's worded. How did you?
So that's
No,
so
because
it's
no,
available
it's
from
because
Saving
like
sorry.
like when this
It's
was
a big bad translation.
And then I just
yeah, so
showed it
no,
from
no,
the
because it's
from the notes here,
okay.
right?
So-
At least we need to do another
So
one.
asterisk
It's
kommer
because
running
here.
Node virker.
your V
Node.
error.
Og du kan jo selvfølgelig også bare starte en
If I'm doing that, then it's sort of from the notes here.
Det kan også gøre det.
selvfølgelig. Du kan sagtens køre like Python.
So now React is
But it's good that you were
in this compiled.
Det er mere, hvis du gerne vil have en linking og alt det der integreret, der bliver til. Så skal du have en sted på Windows, så skal du stadig gøre det. Det er bare lidt ekstra arbejde.
The package lock JSON change it again.
This is
Det er så meget bedre.
with
Det er line break,
This is
meget bedre.
for
This is the part that I am.
En ting, jeg synes, der er fandens brugbart, ikke? Hvis jeg gør sådan her.
I'm running both. So this is
Men det er i hvert fald, hvis du har working tree changes, så kommer der et kryds der.
So this is
Det er bare default, det koster flere penge. Altså det er
Er det noget, man skal installere selv?
jeg tror det er noget, du skal installere settings. Det er basically bare git status. Og hvis der er noget som helst hvis der er noget som helst andet end det her,
Yes, conflict.
så er der commit and så er der en branch. Jeg kan også få en branch, det er sådan
So when I did that for the
Husk bare, jeg har set
then one in
Max gør det ikke, at det er homework. Vi vil have
so I only keep up and
macOS agnostic feedback to Unix.
I think that's somewhat less complicated. This
Did you want help with the database? I think you said.
I like
Agree with the random setting.
Are you completely on everything? Yeah.
we don't have to worry
I
about
copied this, and now I have 7 points. I had 8. I can figure out which one I messed up.
I was dead.
Okay.
What the
The
fuck?
big screen on my side.
I think
Oh no, I made this. You made another one that I.
Oh, I know why. It's because I removed the crotch. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I added this shit.
So you want the GUI? Which code? I don't think I understand how much
My SQL. Yeah, you can get my SQL put on there. So here it goes something, right? How will you by console? Here it goes console.
source. I connected it.
what you posted on Slack, was there numbers on that?
Yeah.
Can you edit the message?
File path.
Just so it stays consistent.
Because I deleted it
Oh
again.
yeah.
But I had
Yeah, there's like the task number or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we need to edit that.
Okay. So it adds up one. It takes one number from. So
Yeah.
4 is 3.
Yeah.
This is 2.
And I made like an SQL table, right?
6.
Like a script. Like this is everything it runs, right?
It's
So
only-
in
This is 5. 1 is correct, right?
Yeah.
okay.
This is.
I connected to
This is 2.
Cool.
So 3, 2, yeah.
Yeah, maybe just post a message that we updated. Oh, right, I do it because I sent the link.
Yes, of course.
I'm still recording the screen. It must be so interesting seeing me edit the README files.
You could also just insert whatever.
Is it this one that's the public one, or is that ours?
No,
That's
it's class
ours.
6. It's class 6.
Alright, of course.
I can't quite remember how exactly I did it, but I did something like this. And I could insert add a database here. That is this database.
Can you just send me your email?
Source, the script. That is
And
your
look at this dumb thing that I created.
can't quite remember the exact details now, but something like that.
Now
What did you say, Jake?
Det var noget om det der
So, because I was like using TypeScript.
Kan du til mikrowave for Express?
Yeah, do you think we should stop the recording now?
Yes.
No, yeah, next.